Dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe. Followers, likes, double tap. Now they control your life.
What is going on, beautiful people? Welcome back to the 817 Podcast, where we talk about the lovely city of Fort Worth, Texas. We get into politics, business, culture, news. If it impacts you as a Fort Worthian, we discuss it. We give you 3 short stories, 1 big story, and wins and losses. And how was your transportation mixer?
It was really, really good. We had a great turnout, and I think that everybody was excited to see that there's people in a group in Dallas that are advocating for public transportation, and there's a group in Fort Worth, and we've now discovered each other's Discord accounts and have joined, and we had a gentleman from the Dallas group come over and talk about the work that they're doing to try to be supportive of DART and fight the bills that are endeavoring to reduce DART funding. So
is DART going to be okay?
Not if these bills go through, they're not. And, you know, Fort Worth won't be okay either, because one of the very first things that could be on the chopping block if their funding is reduced is their partnership with Trinity Metro on the TRE. And the TRE goes back and forth between Dallas and Fort Worth and has been a combined effort between DART and Trinity Metro for a number of years. And if you listen to the people that I listen to, all you hear about is, why don't they have Sunday service? And not only will they not have Sunday service, they might not have service at all if this funding reduction happens. And we had a young lady who joined us at the Gather who mentioned that she takes the TRE to Dallas every day for work, and that she did 1 month of driving to Dallas and taking toll roads, and that she spent $600, I think she said, in tolls in a month. So if you think public transportation is expensive, you should think more about these toll roads and all of the expenses of building more roads.
Yeah. Well, if you lose your funding, there is a group that maybe you guys can learn from, because Fort Worth-based Texas Refuge Office received $47 million in pause funds after a legal battle. Last week, we talked about Catholic Charities losing its funding, but after a 2-week legal back and forth and a joint status report filed by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, an attorney for Catholic Charities, the government said it has authorized all grant payments requests by Fort Worth nonprofit as of March 17th. The Fort Worth nonprofit has operated the Texas Office for Refugees, the statewide agencies designated by the federal government to lead refugee resettlement, since 2021. Texas withdrew from the nation's refugee resettlement program in 2016, effectively leaving nonprofits to administer the funds. The charity confirmed it received over $47 million in its bank account Monday. Nice little comfort there, accounting for funds that the nonprofit requested for January 29th. The deposited funds came days after the charity warned it could have laid off 169 employees, according to a notification the charity submitted to the Texas Workforce Commission. The funding pause led to hundreds of layoffs across at least 24 refugee agency partners that received grants through Catholic Charities, according to the lawsuit. Catholic Charities Fort Worth did not respond to questions about whether the deposit meant the charity would no longer face layoffs by time of publication. This all came after Trump's administration announced and then reversed a federal funding pause in January. Catholic Charities Fort Worth said many other organizations received their allocated funds while their payment requests went unanswered. There's a lot going on here, but we did talk last week about the loss of some employees in federal agencies. We talked about that also with nonprofits. Could this be a sign that what's happening with Trump is just a lot of noise, but not left with actually going to do pretty much anything?
I don't know. This whole thing raised up in my mind a memory of when Paul Ryan came to Texas, came to Fort Worth to visit Catholic Charities specifically, because of the job that they do in refugee services and how incredibly good a job that they were doing. And they were highlighting it and basically saying, this is what we should be doing this like across the entire country. So when this whole thing flared up and I saw that the federal government was saying we need to cut the funding to this organization that a Republican had literally come to our city to study and then go back and tell the whole rest of the country they should be doing it this way, I thought, what the heck? So I was scrambling just now to find, when that visit happened, and it was in May of 2016. And he came and basically highlighted the work that Catholic Charities does and said what a great job they were doing and how that should be a model that should be replicated across the country. So I think it just goes to show that this federal analysis or lack of analysis before just chopping funding to things is not being very well thought out. And it is a bummer that it is such a struggle to basically just they go and hack, and then we show, hey, that was a mistake, and then they got to roll it back. And a whole lot of stress is caused to the people who are doing that work. A whole lot of stress is caused to the people who are relying on that work. And it's just the most backwards way of doing efficiency that you could ever imagine.
Yeah, and what we're also seeing is that government spending is up 7% year over year, looking at February at $308 billion monthly deficit versus a $296 monthly deficit the same month in 2024, running at a $3.6 trillion deficit on a $30 trillion economy. Doge has done absolutely nothing so far. All of its recommendations were ignored in the 2026 spending bill that Congress is paving through this week and trying to get passed. Also, a Reuters article showed that U.S. government spending has not slowed under Trump. The U.S. government spent more during President Donald Trump's first month in office than it did during the same period a year ago. And signed, his cost-slashing effort has yet to reduce the nation's heavily fiscal obligations. So what you constantly see is Elon Musk going up there, creating some type of flare, acting as if he's done something, and then they kind of reverse back and realize that's not true. And then they change the number, they change the cost cut, and they kind of put it in little words without highlighting it. So they make big bunch of noises of slashing a bunch of stuff, but when they recorrect, they don't bring the same megaphone behind it, which also is a disillusion to their base who thinks that any efficiency is happening. So U.S. government spent $710 billion in Trump's first month, up from the same period a year ago. When you look at rising interest, retirement, health costs, offsetting any savings, no apparent savings yet from fired workers.
So I did mix up my dates just a little bit previously. I think it was 2016 when Catholic Charities first reached out to Paul Ryan to, let him know what it was that they were doing and how well they were doing that work. And it was 2018 when he actually came to Fort Worth to witness it for himself.
I wonder what this all is going to do as Republicans do disagree with a lot of the Trump administration or the Governor Abbott voucher situation. What does this break and look like for these communities? And I just think about what kind of time are we living in? Where does the next 2 to 4 years take us? What kind of response happens from this? Because we are always shocked by a response. If this year's election was the rise of young men voting for Trump or whatever the thing you see in the election, I wonder what we're going to see from these outpours. So we will go from there. Let's go ahead and move into short story number 2, where Texas might make it easier to build smaller homes.
So this is a Star Telegram article entitled "Texas Might Make It Easier to Build Smaller Homes. Tarrant Leaders Are Speaking Out." There's a little history behind this because 2 years ago in the legislative session, there was a bill submitted, I think in both the Senate and the House, about reducing single-family lot size and allowing additional units to be built on a single-family lot. And that did not pass, and there was a lot of angst and upsetness about it. This time around, they have come back and basically just said that they want to pass a bill that would restrict cities over a certain size. So they are only cities that are over 300,000 residents. And it would say that you could not have subdivisions, single-family subdivisions, less than 1,400 square foot lots. And then they put the caveat in there that it's only for new subdivisions, so it's not like you could go and carve up lots in an existing subdivision, and that those new subdivisions have to be at least 5 acres in size. So I'm not even sure where this is going to apply, but in Fort Worth, I think it would apply a lot of places because we have a significant amount of single-family zoning that is undeveloped outside the loop, out more in the sprawly areas. This is being backed by, they say, a nonpartisan co-authors of 8 different co-authors. I would be interested to look and see where all of them live, but I think many of them do not live in cities that are impacted by this bill, which I always find interesting. When you see the authors of a bill not live in communities, when it clearly seems to be targeting the urban cities of Texas. And I think this might be one of those. But if passed, it would outlaw minimum lot size requirements larger than 1,400 square feet, which would plot note with fewer than on plots with fewer than 31.1 dwelling units per acre in some areas. And it also takes aim at building design rules that municipalities might have, forbidding municipalities from requiring homes on small lots, and also not making them have covered parking, not allowing them to have setbacks greater than 5 feet, or fewer than 3 stories, along with some other features. Now, I am all for more housing for more people, but I don't think that bludgeoning the cities from the state level, from an organization that only meets every 2 years, so that if this bill has some impacts that come to light within the first 6 months of it being in place, if it were to pass, can't be fixed for a year and a half. And I think that it's not really a state level thing that should be being dictated from that level. We talk about local control, and I think that part of the reason that this has gotten to the state level is also because people have gotten frustrated with people saying no to developments at the local level. So we have to be willing to talk about different types of housing and different ways of tackling the affordability issue. Because if we just dig in our heels and say, no, not here, not near me, not in my backyard, people who want to build this type of housing are going to go over our heads and go to the state to try to get the ability to do that. So I don't know what the answer is, but I don't think that this bill is the answer.
You oftentimes see the state do things to attack the urban metropolitan areas of Texas because those are the areas that are stopping Republican majority and Republican dominance, if at all. And data is showing that if you just focus on those metros, you can flip Texas without stressing over the rural areas. And so what is your take on, like, is this one of those bills where it's could impact the metros in that way, the way that maybe some of these, like, you know, some of these economic development incentives that were made for rural areas but not allowed for, like, metro areas when it came to tax? Why do you think it's just the bigger areas that will be impacted, and why they did that?
I mean, I think that it possibly is because they feel like they can absorb this type of development better. And if they come from those smaller areas, they probably know that their own constituents would be opposed to this. So they don't want to have their own constituents mad at them for submitting a bill that they would be opposed to. So they're going to try to put it in places where their own constituents won't be angry about it. I think that the last time this was submitted, there was, upsetness because they hadn't specified that it would be new subdivisions only. And so it was a bill that would allow people to divide larger lots in existing neighborhoods and add more units to those lots. And my opposition to that was that you're not going to see that happen in your more wealthy established neighborhoods. People are not going to go in and tear down a $500,000 house and build 2 or 3 or 4, even if they were allowed to. But in your lower income neighborhoods, you would see that kind of thing happen. And so I thought it had a disproportionate impact on, lower income neighborhoods. And I thought that wasn't fair either. The other issue is they tried to say that they would fix that by allowing individual neighborhoods to have, like, an HOA, a homeowners association, would then put additional restrictions on to stop those things from happening. But that's not going to happen in those low income neighborhoods either. That would protect those wealthier neighborhoods that already pretty much have the protection, because people aren't necessarily going to go and try to buy those houses and build multiple units on those lots. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that this is couched in the preface of trying to attack affordability and trying to allow more houses to be built more quickly. But the other thing that comes up is even if you have this as a zoning category in your single family zoning and it's in the far-flung parts of your community, it's going to be adjacent to existing lots that are larger. And every time you come in for a zoning change where you're requesting smaller lots next to existing lots that are larger, you're going to get opposition from the nearby neighbors who think that this is going to lower their property values. And I think this happens, all over in the more suburban sprawl areas. And in the past, it's been opposition to density that are apartments. And in this case, it's smaller single family, owner occupied homes. But even that has brought on opposition from people that live nearby. So I don't think it's going to get you past the opposition. And I think that the solution to all of this is just the ability to have educational information provided, but you're still going to run into folks that are going to say no, even if they are shown information that proves their concern wrong or not a concern, because they just will say, well, we're going to have to just agree to disagree, and they'll still be opposed to something.
Well, there you have it. That was short story number 2. We're going to move into short story number 3, where we talk about what is an illegal protest, what to know if you attend a protest at a Texas university. This is a March 19th report by Tiffany Jackson. It is also important to know we are recording on Thursdays. So if there was other stories you were wanting to hear that does come out, that is because Ann is not in town going to go see her lovely family, and I get a weekend. So I'm really excited for that. Today we have an interview with the César Chávez Dolores Huerta committee to discuss the importance of Hispanic heritage and Hispanic people's involvement in Texas. So that will be our big story.
So a timely third story ahead of our guest today is an article in the Fort Worth Star-Telegram entitled "What is an Illegal Protest and What to Know If You Attend a Protest at a Texas University." Although it goes into details about protesting and marching in other public spaces, so it's not just focused on universities. And why this is relevant to the guests that we're having is that they have a march coming up. So I think that there has been a lot of stories in the news recently about cracking down on marches and protests and people who have been arrested in various places because of their involvement and participation in protests and marches. And so this article spells out that after an individual was arrested at who is a Palestinian activist at Columbia University, Trump announced that this was the first of many to come over illegal protests. So it's interesting that this article tries to spell out, what is illegal and what is legal, because there is a lot of things that are covered by our Constitution that we are allowed to do. So what is covered by the First Amendment for a protest, and what you should know as Texans about your rights before you go to a protest? The First Amendment of the Constitution guarantees key freedoms, including the right to peacefully assemble. This means that you have the right to express your opinion openly without government interference, as long as the assembly remains peaceful. Your rights are strongest in traditional public forums, which include parks, sidewalks, and streets. While you generally have the freedom to express yourself on other public land, like plazas outside of government buildings, it's important that your actions don't block access or interfere with the building's intended function. On private property, owners have the right to impose restrictions on speech. However, the government cannot limit your speech if you're on your own property or you have the permission of the owner. It's also important to remember that counter-protesters have the same rights to freedom of expression, and police must treat both protesters and counter-protesters equally. You are legally allowed to photograph anything in plain view, including government buildings and law enforcement officers, when you're in a public area. And on private property, however, the property owner may have their own rules about photographing and videoing. So then they go on to talk about what is an illegal protest and indicate that protesting is a fundamental right protected by the First Amendment, but not every demonstration is automatically legal. The First Amendment actions can cross the line and turn a peaceful protest in one that will get you arrested if violence or destruction of property, trespassing on private property, or blocking roads or public areas. There is an interesting twist in Texas law that I did not know, and I learned reading this article, that it is illegal to protest within 1,000 feet of a funeral service for 3 hours before or 3 hours after the event, as this could disrupt the service. And likewise, protests at critical infrastructure sites, such as oil pipelines or construction areas, are heavily regulated with severe penalties for trespass or disruption of these facilities. Blocking highways, sidewalks, or passageways that are accessible to the public, especially emergency routes, are prohibited and can also lead to felony charges.
Yeah, that funeral one. I mean, there must have been some guy who really was hated by people to have a protest to then get into Texas law.
Yeah, I'm not sure how that came about.
They did not like the person who was getting buried. Whoever that was.
They think they were protesting the actual funeral.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to look into that.
When you look at private universities like TCU, they also have their own guidelines. One at that university, it says that the demonstration guideline on TCU website state that protests shall not disrupt university activities, and all demonstrators must register to protest at least 48 business hours in advance. To me, that's not how protests work. Protests are about in-time movement and waves and people like standing up, and you're calling a friend 48 hours before just seems
It's a lot of planning.
like a lot of planning for something that's supposed to be proactive and natural of a movement. But all in all, I think the real conversation I'm trying to figure out here is, what is the future of protesting, and like, does all this angst, do we live to have the courage as people to protest? I call out that we need to find a march, find a rally, find something monthly that we can attend, because there's so many things being dismantled or challenged, like DEI, LGBTQ rights, schools, federal employees. I mean, there is an array of things that are happening. And so all of us should be able to find a march, rally, protest that we can participate in. And one of those is the César Chávez March on March 29th.
It's interesting. I have a history of growing up at a Quaker boarding school where we participated in a lot of silent protests and, peaceful marches and peaceful sit-ins and all of that kind of stuff. And I always felt like Quakers really handled that kind of thing well. And when the school that I went to ceased to be a 4-year high school anymore and started doing some education in civil disobedience and sustainable development and all these like very Quakerly things, I thought that could have been a really great avenue for folks to go and learn about these things so that they could do these things in a way that, doesn't get them arrested.
Yeah, I think I feel like the new wave generation has a different because in some part it needs to create some type of discomfort. Like, it can't just be like I am sharing my voice, but it's not being heard because it's so
there's
cordial.
Rules about
yeah.
amplification and all of that kind of stuff.
And so a part of I think the biggest movements in history, they provided some type of disruptance. And what I'm ultimately interested to see is how much are we more in fear because of the authoritarian fascist regime we have today, or is that going to create us to more step up and be bold? And hopefully it's the latter, but only time will tell. So today we're with César Chávez and Dolores Huerta committee, and we have their president Marisela Jimenez and organizer Maria Morales, which they will have a conversation with us about their upcoming march on the 29th. They will share with us the importance of the history of César Chávez and Dolores Huerta and what is the recent fight in organizing in Tarrant County. So here is Maria and Marisela.
My forward story is I am a transplant from Los Angeles, California. I've been here already 24 years, and I feel that I have become Fort Worthian. Yeah. But if I go to Dallas, if I go anywhere else, this is home for me. I love Fort Worth.
So what brought you here from Los Angeles?
Actually, employment opportunities for my husband.
Okay.
His employment had died out over there. Wasn't finding anything. He came, and within a couple of months, he secured a job. Then we followed, and we've been here ever since.
So you've raised a family here?
I have 5 kids, all adults now.
That's a nice thing. I have adult kids too.
I was going to say my baby's 23, and we can. Don't let me go on that topic because I will and gush all over her and about her.
A forward story. I came here when I was 9. Here in the States in Fort Worth. So I've been here for, I guess, 24 years, like Marisela. Fort Worth is home. I've gone away for school, went to Austin for a bit, went to LA for a bit. But you always come back to your home. So been back for a few years now. I do work in Dallas, but yeah, no, would never live there. So yeah, that's my Fort Worth story.
Cool. Where'd you go to high school?
I went to high school in Haltom High School, so product of BISD. And then I did TCC, transferred to UT Austin, took a few years off, and then got my master's at UCLA.
Well, thank you guys for being here. I would love to start out with just what is the history of the César Chávez and Dolores Huerta Committee of Tarrant County? How long have we had this? Why is it important? And what are the, I guess, historical moments of the organization?
Okay, well, we are celebrating our 25th year anniversary, and that's a wonderful thing, a great thing. And it started off back in 2000 when a group of dedicated workers got together and thought that it was important to have a Hispanic Latino leader being represented in the county, and they worked along with the community to be able to establish the César Chávez holiday. And glad to say that the Tarrant County, oh my God, I forgot the name already. Tarrant County Commissioner's Court, okay, unanimously passed the César Chávez holiday, and that's been in effect since September of 2000.
Yeah, and I think it's very important just to keep the history in mind, just because a lot of like Black and Brown histories are not taught in school, which is ironically that we're having this conversation today because, the president just kind of dismantled public education at the federal level. So just acknowledging that and having an outlet or a presence of our history in our community goes a long way. And grateful to that the committee exists, the César Chávez and the Dolores Huerta Committee, because it's helpful to get reacquainted with the roots, or just acquainted if we've never kind of had that sense of community.
Yeah, could you actually give maybe a quick history or bio of each individual? Because, I can imagine going back to just how some maybe of even useful members of Fort Worth may not know their history and the impact they've had on us.
So both César Chávez and Dolores Huerta were part of the United Farm Workers, right, which originated in California. So it was advocating for workers' rights, especially farm workers, around the grape field and, getting grapes and things like that. Just going to keep it general. So a lot of the unionizing and the legwork and working for those rights expanded to the rest of the country, right? So we have different chapters or committees or organizations alike, or who follow in those steps, kind of this committee, but also like Lupe and RGV and the other César Chávez Foundation in San Antonio. So it's just not only celebrating but commemorating that history, and also kind of taking ownership back of it and kind of revisioning it, and what does that look like now for marginalized communities. Right then, in that time, it was for labor rights, which is still a fight that's going on today. But you also have like immigration rights and like all the other rights that are being infringed upon now, and it's just kind of expanding on that.
Well, what is the recent fight that the organization is fighting for in Tarrant County?
Well, recently, last year, we found out that the Commissioner's Court judge was trying to get rid of the César Chávez holiday. And our committee, along with community members, brought that to the forefront, where we spoke against the dismissal or destroying the César Chávez holiday. And thankfully, they heard us and they kept the holiday on. Okay, we know that come this next September, we may need to gear up again, but it would be a shame that something that was unanimously approved by a majority Republican judge court back then, okay? The César Chávez holiday was unanimously approved back then, that now it would be taken away. And I think that we as an organization, we need to represent the values that Cesar Chavez portrayed, okay, and bring those to our community, where our community has a sense of being represented, okay, and that we, in the spirit of Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta, are here to represent our community in Tarrant County.
So I became familiar with some of the work that you all have done in our community when I was serving on the city council and participated in many of the marches that were held, and then also the street topper signs that were put on, which street is it? I was there, 28th Street. Yeah. So those efforts are still ongoing, and you have a celebration. You said your 25th year coming up on the 29th. Is that correct?
Correct. March 29th, 10 a.m. on Main and 8th Street, downtown Fort Worth.
This work is very important because of, just as you can see, how Tarrant County leadership is treating migrants, undocumented individuals, and also just kids being feared to go to public school just because of ICE and other things going on. How has that changed the narrative? Or I know the history of Cesar Chavez was unions and labor rights, but how has this kind of morphed a part of y'all's, mission or strategy on being able to serve Tarrant County?
We are in a very unique opportunity right now, okay? We know that as an organization, we cannot just stay as a commemorative. Talking about the past is very important. Celebrating our heroes is very important. But we cannot just keep it there. We need to bring it to the moment that we're living, and what is it that we're going to do moving forward. And I say a unique opportunity because we had a meeting, a community plática with people that came from all areas of Tarrant County, different age groups, and they provided their input. Okay, so based on that input, we're going to be able to maybe tailor more. What is it that we are going to continue to do, or do again, or add to what we're doing in support of our community? Our main focus will continue to be education, community involvement, civic leadership. Okay, those are our three pillars, right? But hearing back from the community, that gives us that unique aspect of what areas do we need to consider as well. How can we support our community, our people?
And expanding a little on that is kind of having the committee as an organization that's meeting the moment, right? The migrant community, the communities of color, Latino, wherever that, or just communities of color in general, have been in attack for years, right? But that hostility, that aggression, that hatefulness towards that community, our community, has exacerbated since January of this year, right? So it's, like Marisela says, hearing back from the community and acknowledging those facts, and also investing in that community and what that looks like. For the fight for the holiday, it was critical, and it was reiterated and highlighted our need for organizers, for equipped organizers, for them to not only be supported, morally and like, yeah, you got this, and si se puede, or whatever it may be, but like, how are we compensating them, right? Because a lot of our community is very family oriented and like community, and let's go do this, y échale ganas, y tú puedes, and all of these things, but also like, we need money to survive. And it's just difficult when you have like other organizations that could potentially support monetarily, or, other resources that are just not willing to do so. And so the committee has an opportunity to engage with those, but also engage more with community, just because a lot of our institutions can sometimes forget what community means, or frame community differently than perhaps what people on the ground, organizers, look at or fight for. And so it's just a different tactic. This is just an opportunity to go about that and to learn the work a different way and learn our community a different way.
So is there an opportunity for people to be supportive of the work that you're doing so that you can follow through with supporting those organizers in that way?
Of course. So like Maricela was mentioning, we have the March, March for Justice. So we are taking donations. We are taking sponsorship, which will, help us put on this march, but also like welcome everybody to be an organizer, to take lead, to bring any efforts that they wish to the committee. It's like, hey, we need to address this in this field, education, healthcare infrastructure, whatever it may be that they want to explore. And we're open to any topics, right? Any issues that are important to the community, but also just coming out and talking to us, talking to the committee, because we have leadership and then we have organizers, but we can't assume what the community needs. So any support, be that just coming out to our events, coming out to the march, and also honestly supporting with resources can go a long way.
You both have been here over 20 plus years in Fort Worth. You've been integrated in your communities. How has the community changed? How's the needs, the problems, even just a generational growth of the context between maybe a boomer, a Hispanic person in Fort Worth to now a Gen Zer Fort Worth Latino? Like, what can you tell me? Because at the end of the day, it's our largest population crew in Tarrant County. 35% of Fort Worthians are Latino. And, I think, in so many zip codes, my zip code 76103, majority of households speak Spanish in the house. So what do you feel like is the potential, the ecosystem's challenges that we could all really be dissecting and looking more to for people who are maybe on the outside looking in?
What I see in the community, okay, especially with people that aren't documented, I hear their stories. I hear the fear. I know what's going on. We see stuff on social media, on Facebook or wherever. We see YouTube or whatever, okay? And that feels sensationalized in comparison to the stories that I'm hearing. I'm afraid to go to Fiesta and buy my groceries. Because what about if I get picked up? Okay. How can I still shop for groceries where I feel that I'm safe? Right? So it's stories like that I'm hearing those regularly. And I'm like, okay, that's also an opportunity for us to try to help our people look at things differently, where that fear is not the one thing that's taking the most hold of them.
Your question is like, how have things changed, right? Or kind of the differences. And I think I hadn't thought about it, but Maricela hit a spot on safety. Our community has always had fear, right? I feel like it's part of what keeps us alive in the States, this country. Some thriving, some not, some just surviving, unfortunately. But I think right now safety is such a huge problem, especially, when you have like your younger siblings come up to you and say, hey, Mom, you can't drive me to school anymore because you might get in trouble. Like, how do you explain that to a kid? So I think safety is huge. Because of the current raids and, ICE going out to neighborhoods and knocking on people's doors, like providing tools kind of like know your rights and things like that can go a long way, just because it has shown that it's been proven that it's kept community safe. Just to be aware that you do have rights, even if you're in quote unquote illegal, which is not, you're undocumented, right? It's not, which is like a civil violation, not a felony in itself. So also like being aware of that. I think generationally, going back to a point that I said earlier, like reacquainting with our roots and keeping in our mind like assimilation versus acculturation. I think I'm a millennial, so I can't speak for Gen Zers because they're a whole other world. My sister's a Gen Zer, and I have Gen Zers as co-workers, and just their way of looking at things is very different, right? Even if it's just a few years apart. So understanding how they look at things, because I feel like sometimes generational gaps can cause misinformation or miscommunication or misunderstanding. And when misunderstanding happens within our community, it can be harmful, because even just the word progressive can be triggering to folks, right? And so understanding what it is to mean progressive does not equal socialism, as social media or the just media outlets may say. So understanding that it's just having a dignified life in all aspects, healthcare, education, financials, whatever it may be that you want to focus on. So just starting with that, or just understanding the language, that we have the same mentality, just our language is different. And also addressing things that are perhaps taboo in our culture. I think nowadays there's a lot of like trying to break cycles. There's the machismo aspect, which is very ingrained in our culture, and other things that are being challenged by younger generations, and can cause a little tension between our families and our community. But just understanding and learning to listen to each other can go a long way, and acknowledging that we are not a monolith, right? And going back to the taboo conversations, like also acknowledging that there's like the anti-blackness, and we are anti-certain communities because we just don't understand them, or we just haven't opened ourselves to do so. So it's also like having that opportunity to engage with folks and embracing the folks that perhaps we have marginalized within our own community just because we haven't been willing to listen. So I think just with the platicas and providing that space will be very fruitful, and can help us grow and help identify those efforts that the committee could potentially focus on, and support in not only a march every year, but like how can we prepare ourselves and how can we equip ourselves to address those and any other challenges that may come from other entities, from other institutions that are harmful to us being in this country and just being with each other.
You guys both hit on the point of safety is much more kind of at the top of the forefront of today's issues. Has that led to have you seen more participation and boldness, or have you seen more of the fearfulness of being more quiet? And what do you need from communities? And I imagine the most privileged of Fort Worth to be probably the one standing up, attending marches if you can, being able to be involved if your safety is not as vulnerable. What have you seen? And a great example I see this with is school vouchers in public schools. I mean, the array of activism that has happened because of that. Are you seeing anything similar with what's happening in your communities around immigrants?
So there was here protests not too long ago here in Fort Worth, right, in La Gran Plaza and downtown, and it was led by a 20-year-old. So I think the boldness and the anger, honestly, for our people have been more potentially voiced by younger generations because there is that privilege. There's not as much fear as being deported, potentially, because you have the proper documentation. However, the danger is always there because at the end of the day, we're still brown and we still get racially profiled, and your citizenship means nothing to ICE at times, as we have seen in history, right? From personal anecdotes, I know like moms and grandmas have not left their house since January because they are scared. They do not want to go outside. They do not want to be in that put themselves at risk, right? And which is also unhealthy and for various reasons, mentally, physically, etc. So I think there is boldness. I think people are eager to find a space where they can express that boldness, where they can express that desire to fight, where they can express that anger in a healthy way, right? It's just identifying what that looks like for certain people, which goes back to the listening, right? Because how my mom expresses her anger or boldness is not going to be the same as how my sister does, because there's just different resources. There's the language barrier, which is huge when you're trying to fight for something. If my mom wants to go fight, either I go or my siblings go because she's not going to be able to communicate. So also acknowledging the fact that language plays a huge role in how that gets articulated.
To your question of what can people do, okay? Well, people can speak up, be there for those that can't. I can be the voice of that person that's terrified going to Fiesta to buy her groceries, okay? all of us can take an active role, and what is wrong and speak out against it. I think the moment has come where we cannot be middle of the fencers, straddling that fence. We need to decide, are we doing the right thing? And right now it might be about immigration, but who knows what the next topic might be, right? And we wait till we find the right topic, it might be too late. By that point, by that time, we already failed to respond, failed to act. By being silent, we are part of the problem, right? So I got the chance to go to one of the March for Families that Arlington did. And there was the cutest little boy, nervous, scared. He was shaking, but he had his paper right there that he had written. It says, "I'm here because I can talk. My dad can't talk, but I can." Right? And there were a lot of wonderful speakers, but that little boy, like, hit me right here in my heart. Right? That's what everybody can do. Everybody that has a voice, speak up. Don't be quiet. It doesn't matter whether we're black, brown, yellow, pink, or whatever color in the world we are. Because silence is part of the problem.
Could you guys kind of give us more details on the march on March 29th? How could we show up? How can we speak up? Is this something where we can bring our own signs, kind of all that kind of jazz? Any kind of logistical stuff would be great to hear.
Yeah, so we're going to start at 10 a.m. on March 29th, Saturday, on Main and 8th. So we'll come together. You can bring your own signs. It's a family event. It's open to everyone. We will have escorts kind of keeping us safe and going through the march itself. Then we'll start the assembly at 11 in front of the courthouse and start walking. And we're going to do a loop and come back to the courthouse where we have kind of speakers, kind of talk to the community, address. We'll have a performance, but some of Danza Azteca, who's going to do kind of a, something that resembles the Aztec dance. So just kind of, reinvigorating ourselves with our culture, reinvigorating ourselves with the roots, and just creating that space for safety, for community, for dialogue between folks. Afterwards, around 12:30, we'll go down to Artes de la Rosa to have a birthday celebration for César Chávez and Dolores Huerta, and to just celebrate their work, celebrate their life, and again, continue with community. But yes, anyone is welcome. Feel free to bring your own signs.
Bring your puppies. In the past, people have come with their doggies. All right. And I'm excited to share that we have our grand marshals are Paul Chávez and Little Joe. Paul Chávez, César Chávez's son, right? It would be I'm looking forward to hearing what he's got to say. I'm looking forward to hearing what Little Joe has got to say, and maybe he'll sing a song as well, right? It's just a wonderful family-friendly event. It's not a time to sit on our couches, surfing the net, watching TV. It's a time to take action and do it action in the spirit of César Chávez, in a nonviolent environment, right? That's what he advocated, nonviolence. So that's what we're hoping for, a really fun and if the weather cooperates, beautiful, sunny morning, right? And then we can go party at Artes de la Rosa.
So you had a number of planning meetings coming up to get ready for this march, but you talked about the things that came up at these planning meetings that helped you understand like the needs of the community and things that the committee might do going forward, so that you're not just planning for a march, but that you're supporting the community in the areas that they have needs. Are those meetings going to continue throughout the year, where you can continue to kind of have that interaction with folks so that you can hear the needs of those folks, so that the committee can work on those other things that they're working on throughout the year?
Yeah, so the committee's also going through, I guess, a transitional period with from previous or current board members to identifying folks who are interested in becoming new board members moving forward. So just to clarify, so we had Community Platica, which is the event where we got community members who came in, different generations, different, sectors of their work in, and kind of have the feedback and dialogue. And then we had the planning meetings for the march itself, who folks were also welcome to come to. And so the Platicas is something that we do want to continue moving forward, just to keep community engaged and keep that dialogue going, and identifying any efforts that the community wants to engage with between now and whatever next big fight, quote unquote, because it's all fights are big, and kind of putting that effort forward. But yes, the Platicas will continue in some shape or form. It's just a matter of getting through this transition and strategizing what that will look like for the incoming board and the incoming folks who will take leadership of certain roles within the community, while also keeping in mind like the values that the committee is kind of focusing their work in. So integrity is one of them, si se puede attitude, the dignity, and then innovation. So part of it is just reinvigorating the committee of what the needs are now, and how we can accomplish that moving forward.
That really sounds like a great way to set up sustainability so that these efforts continue, filling the pipeline with young people who are newly interested in, and then keeping the traditions, but also infusing the needs of folks as they come along too. So whenever I hear about César Chávez, I remember the story that my dad told me, that he got to actually meet him in 1962 before his kind of activism really took off, because my dad was doing alternative service with teenagers in a summer program for children of migrant workers. And he came through and had lunch with my dad and the head of the program that my dad was working for. And it was like before he started all this organization of laborers and stuff. And my dad's comment was that César Chávez was 35 at the time and my dad was 25. And that he soon went on to form the United Farm Workers later after that visit that he had. So that's beautiful. Yeah.
Well, an excellent conversation we just had. So let's go ahead and move into wins and losses. This is where we highlight wins and losses every week for the city and county, and possibly the state or the country. You never know where they're going to go. But we always start with our losses so we can end with a win. I'll start with my loss. My loss starts with another death in the Tarrant County Jail. A woman who died in Tarrant County Jail in February was essentially starved to death after not being fed according to her dietary restrictions. Kimberly Phillips died in custody of the Tarrant County Sheriff's Office on February 18th. She was moved to John Peter Smith Hospital on February 15th after being put on round-the-clock medical watch in the jail for unspecified amount of time. Again, this just shows you what continues to happen in our jails. This makes it, I believe, the 72 death under Sheriff Wayborn. And again, people who go to jail still have the dignity to live and go through our judiciary process so that they can get the right response to whatever crime they created or went through. And so again, another death under our sheriff.
So my loss is something that I'm going to try to turn into a win by telling you all about it today. One of our 817 Gather members shared with us that the Funky Town fridges are struggling to keep those full and available to help feed folks in the community. And so my loss is that it's a struggle to keep those refrigerators full and that service in our community up and running and available. So my win, hopefully, out of this loss will be that by sharing this with you today, that many of you will take this as an action that you can go forward with, as we have been encouraging folks to do, and help stock those fridges. So I'll have EJ include in the show notes a link to the Instagram where you can get the information about places that you can donate to in order to have those refrigerators stocked, or where you can go donate food and items to those refrigerators yourself.
Yes, great organization doing important work. My win is going to be the upcoming panels for city council candidates. so that you, me, and others could have insight before the May 3rd election. Fort Worth Report is organizing several events plus others that are happening within the community. There will be a Help Center District 3 and 9 forum on March 19th at 6:30 p.m. There's also a Cowtown Democrat forum at 5:30 to 8 p.m. on March 25th. You're also seeing Fort Worth Families Forward District 5 and 11 forum 6 to 8 p.m. March 27th. So all of these are coming up, and we definitely want you to participate. And trust me, there is more. Downtown Fort Worth Inc. and Fort Worth Downtown Neighborhood Alliance District 9 forum. Fort Worth Report just did a great job of listing all of these that are available to us. And so make sure you remember, let's try to get out to one thing in real life. A march, a forum, an event, because we have to go from sideline listeners who dwell and stress about the environment that we exist in, but the real people who are going to get out of this is each and every one of us making micro efforts to make this world a better place.
So my win is also an opportunity to get out and join with other folks that might be like-minded in supporting the arts. Arts Fort Worth is having Arts Forward, a summit for the arts in Fort Worth on Saturday, March 29th from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. I'm actually going to be moderating one of the panels, but I encourage you to sign up. I just sent EJ a link to the event, and in concert with that, there was an article in Fort Worth Magazine about Sowing the Seeds of Art, a local glass artist's tribute to Cowtown's roots. Fort Worth's newest public art piece has over 200 hands all over it, literally, and each one has a story to tell. And this is a glass and metal piece that glass artist Clifton Crawford is installing on Magnolia. It's the second piece in a 3-piece series of public art that will be installed on Magnolia. So lots of good things happening with the arts.
Well, there you guys have it. Another episode of the 817 podcast. Please subscribe, follow, and share with a friend. The more capacity we built, that there are conscious, modern, forward-thinking Fort Worthians out there doing the work and also staying informed on what is right for democracy. So continue to spread the word of what we do, and we will show up every Monday for you to give our best on educating you on what's going on around the city. Thank you.